Good morning, social studies students. Today I want to teach the lesson on surprise, the source-based skill of surprise. Um, and surprise is the purple skill found here on the skill tree. Before I proceed, please make sure to have your surprise notes with you. And at any point, you may speed up, slow down, or pause the video to suit your learning pace. So without further ado, let's look at this slide. You might remember that Donald Trump was the president of the United States between 2016 and 2020. He's quite well known for being divisive, for making policies that excluded immigrants. And so when we look at news articles celebrating Donald Trump as a person of the year, or the headline that says that Donald Trump urges unity against racism, what strikes you? What is your first reaction? And for me, my first reaction I'll be slightly taken aback because this is not quite what I expect for the news article because of what I already know about Donald Trump. Right? Your first reaction might be surprise. You might be surprised by the source because what the source is saying seems to go against what you know. So suppose we have a set of baseline expectations, baseline knowledge, baseline beliefs about President Donald Trump. Suppose we know that Donald Trump is disliked by the US media outlets. Media refers to newspaper, print media, as well as online reporters. That Donald Trump is a sore loser. He likes winning. He doesn't like losing elections. If he loses, he tries to ask for a rerun. And suppose we also suspect that Donald Trump supports white nationalism and typically is unconcerned with making remarks that can be perceived to be racist or discriminatory, particularly when it comes to immigrants. So these are baseline beliefs and expectations that we might hold about President Donald Trump. So in this source, Donald Trump is praised by the news media, by Time magazine. But we expected that Donald Trump is disliked and criticized by US media outlets. Remember that Donald Trump is also the man who popularized the term fake news. And fake news wasn't Donald Trump trying to tell everyone to be sensitive, critical thinkers, and check reliability of sources. Fake news was a criticism that Donald Trump used against media outlets in the USA who he disliked, typically those that reported critically on his policies. In other words, Donald Trump used fake news as a weapon to scold the US newspapers. So they don't really have a good relationship. You expect the US newspapers to criticize Donald Trump, and here the newspaper, the magazine, has called him Person of the Year, which is actually a praise, a compliment. Therefore, because the source disagrees, is unexpected, you are surprised. Let's look at this one. In this Twitter post, which is very rare because Donald Trump has been kicked off Twitter, but in this Twitter post, Donald Trump challenges the election he's losing. He says that the election might be invalid. People are trying to steal the election. So he's actually casting suspicions on this election he's losing. And you expected that he is a sore loser. You know he is a sore loser. Therefore, what is your reaction? You are not surprised because the source agrees with your expectation. You are not surprised. Let's look at this third example, where the headline is that Donald Trump is against racism. He wants unity. He says we need all to come together to stop discrimination, to stop being mean to other races. And here the expectation that underlies your lens when you are reading this source is that Donald Trump supports white nationalism. He is unconcerned about racism. In fact, he can make remarks that can be perceived as racist when it comes to immigrants in America. When he talks about Mexicans trying to enter America illegally, and he says, let's build a wall to keep them out, he can make remarks that can be perceived to be racist. So what's your reaction? Because the source disagrees with what you know, you are surprised by this source. In other words, what is surprise? What is surprise? Surprise is about expectations. When the source says something that we expect, we are not surprised. And when the source says something that we don't expect, we are surprised. This is the baseline understanding of surprise, and you can use this baseline understanding to address any and all source-based questions. But the next step that comes forward is, how do we know what to expect? How do we know what to expect? Because you know that in SS topics, sometimes you don't have all the knowledge you need to form expectations and beliefs. So you should be on notes page 1. You should be filling in this part about expectations. And then I'll answer the next question of how do we know what to expect. How do we know what to expect is, in SS, based on other sources. We can get knowledge from other sources. Remember, this technique is called a cross-reference. We can get knowledge from other sources that tell us what we should be thinking about, what we can believe. And we can also expect that sources want to fulfill a purpose and agenda, right? So if the source has a purpose, and we have learned how to do the purpose skill using verb, audience, message, outcome. If the source has an agenda, a purpose, and what the source said and did is in line, is completely as what you think its purpose is, then you are not surprised. Of course, the politician Donald Trump would want a recount of the election that he's losing because his purpose, his objective was to win the election. Right, so if you look at the purpose based on its provenance and context, and the source does something in line with the purpose, you are not surprised. Conversely, if you look at the purpose of the source, suppose the election was that Donald Trump is losing, and Donald Trump comes out with a Twitter post that says, I totally respect this election. I respect the next president, Joe Biden. I think he's a great man. If I were a voter, I would have voted for Joe Biden. If Donald Trump says something like that, then you should be completely flabbergasted and shocked. And you should check whether or not that source is really Donald Trump, because you don't expect Donald Trump to say nice things or to say that you should vote for Joe Biden when Joe Biden is his political rival. Therefore, the steps to doing a surprise question, the fundamental step 0 is always ATQ. Answer the question. I'm surprised. I'm not surprised. This source is surprising. This source is not surprising, etc. After you answer the question, you generate a content inference. What does the source say? You check whether this content inference is supported or contradicted by another source. Because if what the source says is supported by this other source, this other source gave you an expectation. I expected this to be the case. It supports the source you are studying. So the source you are studying is expected, and therefore you are not surprised. Conversely, if the source you are studying is contradicted by another source, now you are surprised. You are surprised because, hey, I thought that was the case, but this source says something different. The final step is to attempt to evaluate the provenance of a source and see whether the source did what you expected it to do in terms of its purpose or did not. Okay, so back to this example, I'm going to round up the slides soon and go to the notes. But back to this example, we earlier said that we expected the media to criticize Donald Trump. However, in this case, the media praised Donald Trump. So we are surprised. if you were to look at the provenance and the purpose of this newspaper, we might not be surprised after all. Pause the video, think about it. Why are you not surprised after all that Time magazine has made Donald Trump its Person of the Year? Well, because Time wants to sell more magazines, and there are many Donald Trump supporters in 2016, when Donald Trump has just won the election. So these Donald Trump supporters would love to buy a magazine with their hero and idol all the way on the front page. And even the critics of Donald Trump, the people who don't like him, want to find out more about him. He is a very newsworthy person. So of course, Time magazine would want to put Donald Trump on its front page. And of course, Time magazine would want to feature Donald Trump to increase its sales. And therefore, you're not surprised. It is in line with the magazine's purpose. Right? So can you see that initially you were surprised through the disagreement with the expectation, through a cross-reference, but later on when you look at the purpose, you are no longer surprised. And this is how your own responses can evolve if you want to analyze provenance and purpose. In your worksheet, there are these two sample sources I gave, which make for a good exercise. So let me move on and hop onto your worksheet now. Okay, let's start with the objectives. So you should explain why you're surprised or not surprised by a source based on a cross-reference. So this is the first step. And for those of you who want to go further, you could also look at the purpose of the source, which is analyzed through its provenance. This is really important. The surprise question has helped us you to evaluate if what a source says is unexpected or expected, unexpected or expected. And what is expectation? Expectations is based on our knowledge of a topic based on other sources. In other words, this is the cross-reference. And what we expect a source to say given its purpose, which is based on its provenance and the social context. So this is how we set our expectations of what a source is going to say, based on number one, our knowledge which we can garner through cross-reference, and number two, what we think the source's purpose is going to be. We are surprised when the source says things, when the source does things that is against our expectations, when it is contradicted by what we know about the topic from another source, or when it is going against, is not aligned with what we think the source's purpose is. Can I give you a minute, pause the video, and think what makes you unsurprised by the source? Fill in the blanks here. We are not surprised when the source says things and does things that are in line with our expectations. In other words, the source has said something that is supported by another source. Or what the source has said is in line with its purpose. It was expected to say this, it wanted to achieve a goal, and we can see that goal. And therefore, the 3 steps, of course, step 0 is ATQ. So you can write step 0 as ATQ. Right? ATQ always comes in for every source-based question. And then you make a content inference. You cross-reference to compare the inference with another source. If it's contradicted, you are surprised. If it's supported, you are not surprised. And you could evaluate the provenance of the source to check out its purpose. Step 3 is in a sense optional. It's based on whether you have time to accomplish step 3. But the essential steps are 1 and 2. You must bring out the inference and you must do a cross reference. If you are really, really out of time and you can't do a cross reference even, right? Then when you do the content inference, let's say the source, let's go back to the Donald Trump example. The source has praised Donald Trump for being person of the year, for being an important big shot in America. From a simple inference like this, if you had no time to do a cross reference, use common sense. Use common sense. Surprise questions have a layer of common sense. Wow, well, I'm not surprised that this magazine has made Donald Trump Person of the Year. I'm not surprised because Donald Trump is so important. He's the president. Of course, you must feature an important person like the president. So use common sense if you have no time for a cross reference, and then that common sense will help you accomplish some sort of passing mark. Okay, but ideally we want to analyze sources in its full richness. So I give you about 3 minutes to read source O and source X. Read source O and source X. You can think of source O as like the original source and source X as the cross-reference source. So you know where this is going. I would like you to use 2 different highlighter colors. Let's start with the first the question. Are you surprised by source O? Are you surprised by source O? The first focus we look at is the transportation system in Singapore. So in source O, right, which says the bus never comes on time, source O says that the transportation system is bad. And the evidence we pick out is the bus never comes on time. Meanwhile, source X says that the transportation system is good. Because of the evidence, on the whole, bus services have been consistent. Now, source O is it supported or contradicted? On this focus, it is contradicted by source X. In other words, you are surprised. Surprised because source O is contradicted by source X, which says the transportation system is good. You read source X, you think it's good. You read source O, you realize it's bad, and you are surprised. Hey, I thought it was good. Take a minute, pause the video, and try this focus on your own. So in source O, public attitudes are positive or negative? Negative towards Singapore's government. Quite clearly. How come the government can't fix all these simple problems? And in source X, some members of public have raised concerns about lower frequency of buses. So public attitudes are also negative. So in this case, source O is supported by source X, and therefore you are not surprised. This is a simple sample set of sources that I hope has drawn out the skill of surprise based on expectations very clearly for you. Please look at the two sample sources, hypothetical sources, meditate on them, see how that for a different focus, we draw different inferences, and when we match the inferences, we figure out it's contradict or support, we know it's surprise or not surprise. Okay, and then I move on. How does globalization affect culture? This is the 2018 SS paper, the chapter on cultural impacts of globalization. It is an examinable topic for O-level social studies and not N-level social studies. But nevertheless, all students would have learned about globalization as a topic. And the cultural impacts of globalization tend to be quite accessible because examples like K-pop or McDonald's spring easily to mind. So let's highlight. Globalization has a huge impact on culture, such as the spread of global brands, Disney and McDonald's. This will be useful and relevant in source B later. People are exposed to other cultures far more. Right, you can buy the same products and eat the same types of food. Importantly, a transfer of cultural ideas can promote tolerance and understanding between different groups. However, all cultures will start looking the same. So this is a quick and dirty summary of the cultural impact of globalization. The word homogenization simply means that everything looks the same, becomes similar. So let's look at this cartoon. Take 2 minutes and write at the side of the cartoon the details that you see. You can pause the video. You can pause the video to do so. I will just generate some ideas for you. I assume that you have tried it on your own. So you can add in these details, right? The 4 men, they are in a McDonald's. They are all ordering the same food, even though they are from different ethnic and socioeconomic backgrounds. How do I know that? Because they are of different skin colors, because they are have different dressing. One wears a necklace, one wears a cap, one wears a jacket and glasses, sunglasses. One is seemingly an office worker with a tie. Ditto here means same. Ditto means the same. So all 4 men want the same thing. In other words, they are eating the same food, and therefore they are promoting tolerance and understanding, right? It's from the background information. They are connecting because of the same food that they're eating. When this final man says, "Who says we all can't get along?" it's a rhetorical question. He's actually saying, we can get along. Study source A. Are you surprised by this source? Explain your answer. Remember that we start with content inference, then we go to cross-reference, then we go to evaluate purpose through provenance. So let's start with the inference. The inference is quite clear. It says that globalization is a good thing. It unites people because the common American food has brought together these men of different cultures and backgrounds into the same restaurant, and they are speaking the same language, and they can understand each other, and this can build harmony, can build friendship, can build social cohesion, and build unity. So if I were to craft an inference, I would say, by the way, you can write these stats at the side. And I hope that you wrote the details that I went through verbally at the side of the worksheet as well. So if I were to do this inference, I would say, I'm not surprised by this source because it tells me that globalization can unite people of different cultural backgrounds by allowing them to adapt to a common American food culture. This is evident from the cartoon, which shows What does it show? Here you plug in the evidence you've been looking at, which shows 4 men of different ethnic and economic backgrounds with different skin colors and attires, including t-shirt and office wear, ordering the same McDonald's meal, right? So this means they can eat the same food and therefore they can unite. I'm not surprised because, right, not surprised. I've given you the ATQ. Not surprised because it is supported. In this source, I use the background information for the flow of the lesson to go smoother because I've seen the background information. In general, you should want to use other sources first. But in this source, I do use the background information to show you the flow of an answer, So in this case, the background information, the stuff I want, look carefully. What stuff do I want is the stuff in green. Eat the same food and leading to tolerance, understanding, and unity, right? This really shows that globalization can unite people. The important thing here, two, not surprised by the source because the inference is supported by another source. In this case, the background information. First thing, the stand not surprised has to be matched with a supporting cross-reference. Second thing, the inferences of both your original source and the source you are drawing from must match. There must be a match here. Okay? If you want to do a contradict, if this was a contradict, if this was a surprise, then there must be a match in the two inferences, if you see what I mean. Okay, that's the first thing. Secondly, if you want to move towards the provenance, in this case, think about it, it's an American newspaper. It's saying something that's quite positive about American culture. The American culture here can unite people of different backgrounds. And the motto E pluribus unum is Latin. Out of many comes one. It's a reference to how out of many different immigrant groups comes one American nation. Because America is indeed a nation of immigrants that was built in the 18th century. Right. So this American newspaper's cartoon is quite complimentary towards American culture. It's praising the Americans. Which you expect. So it's not surprising. So the highest level here, I am not surprised by this source. Because what it says about how, people unite through American food culture is in line with its purpose. You expected it because of the purpose of the newspaper. And what is this purpose of the newspaper? To convince Americans, for audience, that American culture is really good. It brings everyone together. It forges a strong national unity and identity. And I even drew in the E pluribus unum motto here, right? And so the Americans will feel proud of their country's culture. The Americans would actively accept more immigrants in the society. That builds social harmony. And since the cartoon is just praising America all the way, it's expected. The American newspaper is praising America, and so it's not surprising. This is a purpose level to the surprise question. Since this purpose level is a not surprise answer that is similar to the above not surprise answer by cross-reference, I use the word furthermore. If I were to change my stand to a surprise stand, then I would use the word however. In this case, I'm adding on to the not surprise and I say furthermore. Okay, think about this, digest it, and then let's move on to source B. In source B, there's a cartoon drawn by an American cartoonist, and This source is very interesting. It tripped up many candidates in the 2018 paper. I want you to think about source B for a moment. Does this source say that globalization has a positive or negative impact? Let's say on people. Let's think about it for a moment. Look at the source. And it's very interesting because they are smiling, right? Hey, I went to Paris and I got some Nike shoes. Paris is in France. Or hey, I flew to Britain and I got some Disney. And hey, I flew to Italy and I got some McDonald's. And you remember in the background information, it mentioned Disney and McDonald's as the spread of a global brand. Actually, there are American brands that went global, right? And so on the first blush, it might seem like this is a praising and positive source. Like, great, globalization means that you can get these things anywhere, anytime on the go. But think about, firstly, what is the purpose of traveling to other countries? Is it to buy more and more McDonald's? Do you go Italy with, the home of different Italian cuisines and go there to eat McDonald's? Is that the purpose of traveling? What does that mean about the local cultures in Italy, France, and Britain? Right? If you think about these angles, suddenly the title of the cartoon makes sense. The title is Problems of Globalization. This is in fact a cartoon that's a clear negative slant, negative take on globalization. Globalization has caused everything everywhere to look exactly the same. We no longer have different traditions and cultures to appreciate. The diversity is lost. Look at the question. Study source B. Is what the source says about American influence of global culture surprising? The command word is surprising. Therefore, I want to use in my ATQ surprising or not surprising. Again, surprising or not surprising. In this case, this question has a focus. Can you find it? The question focus is American influence on global culture. Please take note, this is the question focus. And so we need to make an inference about this focus, right? America's influence is all around Britain, Disney in London, all around France, Nike in Paris, all around Italy, McDonald's in Rome. In other words, American influence here is big. But it's not just big, it's big and negative. Why? Why is it big and negative? So let's figure it out. It's big and negative because the US brands have eroded local traditions and cultures. It's too much, it's everywhere. So I will draw evidence from the cartoon about where it's everywhere, it's too much. And of course, the title. You should quote problems of globalization. The word problems really highlights the negative nature of this source towards globalization. And I challenge you, my social studies students, to look at sources C and D. Look at sources C and D. Decide whether these sources think of globalization as positive or negative. Look at sources C and D. Decide which source is positive, which source is negative, and which source you want to use to answer question 2. So if you want to use a supportive source, if you want to say not surprising, you would add in big and negative, not surprising. If you were to go for the source that says negative as well, and then your ATQ would be not surprising. However, if you went for the positive source, if you said big and positive, you went for surprising, your ATQ here will be surprising. So look for the source, find the cross reference, Do the ATQs. If it's big and positive, it will be surprising. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me repeat that. If you wanted to go for not surprising, you would go for supported. I'm sorry. If you wanted to go for surprising, you would go, sorry, not surprising, you would go for supported. And blah, 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 big and negative. But if you wanted to go for surprising, this would be contradicted. So I invite you to look at sources, C and D. Choose a source that you want to use. If you find a big and positive source, it will be contradicted, it will be surprising. You will find a negative source, it will be supported, it will be not surprising. And based on your stand here, then you decide whether it's a furthermore or however. The final answer would be surprising. And so in this case, if you went with the surprising, it would be a furthermore. If you went with not surprising, it would be however. And then you can look at the purpose provenance answer. Complete question 2. So questions 1 and 2 should be done on the notes. And then you can proceed to try questions 3 and 4 on foolscap. For question 3, quickly, the cultural impact of globalization. When you see the word impact, you should tingle. Is it positive or is it negative? This has to come out in your inference. So you should tingle. You should think of positive or negative, and on who. And then for source, question 4, for source D, there's no focus given, so you have to craft an inference on your own and match it from the other sources. Okay, this was a quick lesson on surprise. Surprise is about expectations. You have to come up with with 3 steps: content inference, cross-reference, and if you have time, evaluate the provenance for the source's purpose. And this concludes our lesson on surprise, which is this skill, the purpose skill, and the source tree. Okay, complete your notes, do questions 3 and 4 on foolscap, and I hope that you have understood this skill. If not, you can book consultation and we can talk about it. Thank you, social studies students.